Hello, Ashley Rindsberg. How are you today?
Hello, Jenny Holland. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Welcome to Saving Culture from Itself on YouTube. You are one of my inaugural videos. I just started this a few weeks ago, so it's a
Hey,
pleasure to have you.
thank you. Thank you. That's awesome. Great news.
So, Ashley, I'll give a little intro to you, and then I'm going to sort of turn it over to you because you've got so many interesting things to talk about. You and I have actually known each other for quite a few years now, like over a decade or something scary like that. We have some very dear mutual friends in common, and we are in pretty much the same line of work, being independent sort of writers and students and watchers of mainstream slash corporate media. And a couple of years ago, you were sort of reintroduced to me, or we reconnected because you were writing a book about the New York Times, where I had worked in the 1990s for 3 years. And we had lots of chats about that. And you sent me the book when it was finished. And it's an absolutely extraordinary piece of work. It's called The Gray Lady Winked. You self published it and everything because no one will touch a book that's critical of the New York Times in the publishing industry. And it was full of absolute jaw droppers. And since then, you've gone on to kind of continue to be something of a gadfly. I mean that as a compliment. Kind
That's
of
good. 'Cause
really,
I don't actually know what that means.
it's sometimes it's
If you
usually like
define the word,
someone who's annoyingly difficult and constantly pointing out flaws and things. So
okay.
from
Sounds
their
like a
perspective,
compliment.
that yeah, it's definitely a compliment. Oops. And so from there, you've continued on along in that vein, and most recently, you've been doing these. So you've worked for Pirate Wires, which is a fantastic publication that I read regularly, and most recently, you've been doing an extremely important. I mean, I think it's like foundationally important deep dive into the inner workings of Wikipedia. So, why don't we start with the Wikipedia and then we'll go backwards in time to the New York Times book? And can you like what are the connections, if any, between the two topics other than they're in the media?
They're both like these institutional pillars of information, and they're both like so much of both of them rests on these brands that are just amazing institutional brands. Sorry, we had a little intrusion there.
That's okay.
They're institutional brands, they're international, they're global, they're information based, and they're also ways that like the quote unquote establishment, I don't want to bring that term too early into this conversation, but I guess I just did, uh, is able to express itself, if we use a charitable way of putting it. It's a way that the institution understands knowledge, understands the world, the establishment, institutional establishment. And, that there's, not to be conspiratorial, that's a very specific thing. It's sort of what's generally been a center left seat of power in Washington, in media in New York, and has sort of these global appendages that it's tied to global institutions, and sometimes it's UN related, or it could also be private, like Aspen Institute and these kinds of things, where there's a consensus that emerges. It's not they all think exactly the same, but I think there's a broad worldview that's accepted as generally aligned with the truth. And for this group of people, again, it overlaps with the Davos set, and it's not a conspiracy theory. It's just the way the world is. The New York Times is the newspaper that they read. It's the opinions that they feel express their own worldview in real crystal terms. And Wikipedia is the sort of messy, dirty internet version of it for them as well. So they're very tied in that sense. And of course, the other thing is that Wikipedia relies on the mainstream media for all of the assertions that it makes on its pages. It's got a
Right.
source of a list of reliable sources, and they're coded green for reliable, generally reliable, or red for generally unreliable, or sometimes gray, like Fox News, I think they call it depreciated or deprecated. You could never use it. And when that list was created, I think in 2017, the very first generally reliable news outlet added to it was the New York Times. And the first unreliable was the Daily Mail. This is kind of this like imbalance in the media, which, find interesting for a variety of reasons.
Yeah. I mean, the New York Times the paper of record tagline or strapline or whatever it is, their branding is pretty impeccable, at least in that world that you're talking about, the professional managerial class up to the Davos, sort of that pipeline, the flow back and forth, depending on where you are in the socioeconomic ladder, but you're still all inside the cathedral in some way. That there is no other brand that comes close. Maybe the BBC does, and of course they've had their own recent scandals, which have been fantastic. I'm so happy about that. But
The poly
no,
scandal.
tell me what has been your discovery about Wikipedia? I mean, I remember back in the early 2000s, or I guess it was the early 2010s, late the second half of the first decade of the 2000s, like 2006, 2007, Wikipedia was starting to come to the fore in consciousness, and we were all working in media or writing and stuff like that at the time in New York. And I remember having debates with people like, can you use Wikipedia as a trusted source or can you not? But of course, the ideological takeover hadn't fully ripened. Like, we were all demographically and intellectually homogenous at the time, but woke hadn't entered the lexicon. Woke certainly hadn't entered the institutions. And so it was more of a debate of like, do you do your own firsthand reporting or can you use Wikipedia? But now it's a whole other ball of wax. So can you tell me how?
Wikipedia, since those early days, or even since like its middle period of growth in the 2010s or so, it has become this massive thing and massively important thing. So there are around 7 million articles, and that's a lot of articles when you think about like a traditional encyclopedia. But even more importantly, it became quite consciously and deliberately on their part something that they consider to be infrastructure, global infrastructure. That's the term they actually use. They call it a global knowledge infrastructure. Sometimes Jimmy Wales, the co-founder, will actually say, we are infrastructure of the world. I mean, what else could you say that that's true about? You could like say that's shipping lanes and air lanes and maybe some internet infrastructure, but like that's a very small number of very big things. And it's an exaggeration a little bit, I think, on his case to say we're infrastructure of the world. It's like a very marketing-y kind of thing, but Jimmy and Wikipedia are very good at that. But the truth is that when you're looking something up on Google, that's a topic. It's not what's the best like shaving cream or something. If it's a topic about anything, your first result on Google is going to be Wikipedia. It's going to be a Wikipedia article. And the knowledge panel on the side of Google is probably, at least to some extent, going to be informed by the same article. And the AI overview that Google will give you will also be informed by that same article from Wikipedia.
Right.
And when you shift over to Perplexity or to ChatGPT or to whatever AI, that's the case too. Not only are they pulling information directly from the site, like as using it as a reference, but they're also using it as training data. So the worldview gets ingested into the AI, and it disproportionately shapes the AI because Wikipedia is A, considered very reliable, high quality, and B, it's highly, highly, highly structured data. And again, very deliberately done, very clever, smart people that have planned this in some cases on the volunteer front, building out a data structure that is a mirror to the textual Wikipedia. And that just made it amazing to train AI as training data. So you do get to this point where it is kind of infrastructural. It plays a role of information infrastructure, and it's been increasingly melded into the infrastructure, the knowledge or information infrastructure system. And again, deliberately, not by happenstance. The people who are running it, as critical as some of us might be sometimes, these are very smart people. And this is why Wikipedia is where it is today, which is still extremely, extremely important.
Right. So what's the downside?
The downside is that you are getting a disproportionate amount of information that's been shaped by a tiny number of people on a given topic. And most of them are there either because they have some kind of ideological investment in a topic. I mean, they are human beings. They are not angels. They are not epistemological angels and divine beings. They have their own desires and wants and beliefs and priors that they bring to this activity. And those people on a same side of a given issue, more or less, will naturally cluster together. And it so happens that by far more than not, editors tend to be on the left. Some of them tend to be on the extreme left. They're very either academic themselves or academic minded, and that also entrenches them toward the left. And across topics, you see a bias show up. And I'm not just saying this as Ashley Rindsberg, journalist who's found a few of these stories and topic areas that have been affected. I can also say David Rosado, who is a machine learning researcher in New Zealand, did a really amazing study of this. And he just looked at American politicians, Supreme Court justices, journalists on the left and on the right, and he measured sentiment against each in Wikipedia articles from a lot of articles. And he ran a proper study. He's a scientist. And you can just look at the chart. If you're on the right, you are more likely to be associated with negative sentiment on Wikipedia. And if you're on the left, you're more likely to be associated with positive sentiment on Wikipedia. And that's kind of across the board for all those different categories I mentioned. So that is kind of like the baked in bias. But then of course you have these like solar flares of ideological attacks and things that go really, really far, like really sometimes off the deep end. That's the case with the reporting I did on these pro-Hamas or pro-Palestinian or anti-Israel, whatever you want to call them, editors. Around 40 in the core, is probably around 100 in the bigger group. And these editors have together just completely reshaped the entire Israel-Palestine topic space, making 1 million edits to like 10,000 articles in and around that space. And some of them are really crazy. Some of them are really, really disturbingly, wildly crazy.
So talk to me about that in a little bit more detail. And how did you I mean, I often find that the proof is in the pudding. Like, you by their fruits, you shall know them. Like, you can tell from the end result that something's gone awry in the back end. So I get that the suspicion would be there. But how did you actually sort of get in and get to that granular detail of seeing how many edits were made and who the editors were and all that stuff? Can you talk to me about that?
That, that was like, some of it was me diving deep into these entries and articles, and some of it was having really good sources on the story. People who are...
So real journalism.
Yeah. Yeah. Just the classical, traditional, boring thing. And, the thing about Wikipedia, one of the good things, and maybe a bit of a silver lining, is that you have a lot of people on the site who really care about it in a way that I would say is good faith. Like, again, they're human too, and they have their own perspectives and they have their own beliefs on topics, but they actually think that not only is the site important, but they really, really recognize its impact on the world. And they're like, this is what's happening in this given topic space is bad for the world. It's having a bad impact, a bad effect. So they spend the time and they spend their energy and they go deep and they do their best. And this is something that I would say, for the most part, Wikimedia Foundation, which owns the site, does not do. They actually don't investigate this stuff. They don't have good tools for it. The tools that people are building outside of Wikipedia are way better, aside from like a few basics that the site either operates or supports. So you get a lot of user-generated data, and you get a lot of good sources.
So you mean the volunteers who... So I actually don't know how this works. Like, I don't understand even how Wikimedia Foundation owns this. Like, how does it actually work? What's the structure?
The Wikimedia Foundation was set up pretty early days at that time, it was Jimmy Wales. He initially had funded the site through his private internet company that he owned. And it sort of started to take off. And I guess at some point they understood that, it's volunteer run. It's not going to be a for-profit thing. So they created a 501c3, the Wikimedia Foundation, which now owns and operates the site. So what they do is the technical backend that, keeping the servers on and making sure like things don't break on the site. Right. Security, like cybersecurity, and keeping bots away and all that kind of thing. A lot of communications, a lot of marketing, a lot of PR, operational stuff. The site itself, though, is run, let's say, 99% by volunteers. There is a tiny bit of the Wikimedia Foundation does have a basically unlimited ability to make any edit they want and to ban any user they want. So in that sense, it's very much like a tech company. Like, X can just take you off the site tomorrow, and actually so can Wikimedia Foundation. And they don't have to tell you or anybody else why they did it. They can just do it.
Mm-hmm.
But most of the content, nonetheless, is written by Wikipedians, volunteer editors who are, they are arguing with each other, debating, you can say, with each other. There are admins on the site who are also volunteers who can adjudicate on these different disputes. There are arbitrators who are sort of the, so-called high court of Wikipedia, which can make more important decisions. They hear like big cases. And there's a few other categories of power users that keep the site running.
So do some of these volunteers, can I infer from what you're saying that some of these volunteers are sort of like the OG internet freedom guys, like from back in the day when, like, remember there was a brief moment in the early 2000s when the internet was just like this free place and everything was going to be accessible, and it was sort of like anarchic and kind of left wing, but not in a communist doctrinaire way. Like there was, it had this sort of cool outlaw vibe.
Yeah.
So are some of those people sort of like from that original era, and people truly did believe in freedom of information?
If they are, I haven't encountered them, I would say. I think that's kind of, it feels like I know the kind of vibe you're talking about. It's like the Aaron Schwartz type thing, and what's his name, Jason Lanier, the Hackers the movie vibe.
Right. I think that's probably where I'm getting this from. This is not like deep knowledge on my part.
But no, I think it's mostly today, mostly on the site, you're going to find people who are deeply entrenched. Again, if it's politics or culture, society, like I'm not talking about articles on languages or math or something, and I'm sure those guys have their own disputes, no doubt, geography, even, like whatever. But on the more political and social and cultural stuff, you're mostly going to find people who are invested in the topic in some way, and they are generally there for that topic. And it's not to say that they don't range across topics, they do, but I think you're less going to find someone that has just kind of this like broad internet philosophy working on a topic than someone who's like interested in China working on Chinese topics, or Israel and Palestine on that, or some people who are just like, it could be esoteric, German history, and that seems to be very siloed and kind of niche driven.
Yeah, well, that's kind of not surprising. But so tell me more about the Hamas, the Hamas influenced articles that you wrote about.
These guys have been really working hard to make this kind of shift and to really shift the frame on Wikipedia regarding Israel, Palestine, and Gaza and Hamas. And some of them are very aggressive, and like they're very, very open about this in a way that makes you wonder how it could go on for so long. For
You're
example,
talking about
editors, yeah,
admins?
who are working. Sorry?
Admins or editors?
There are admins involved, definitely. But some of the editors are power editors, and they have huge edit counts. They have a lot of experience and a lot of clout, I guess. But they do things like, in one case, there was an editor who was removing tons of mentions of Iranian human rights abuses from various pages, and then demonizing the PKK. I think it was the PKK. It may not have been. It was a resistance group that's also been labeled a terror group by the United States, but really going after them in a very hard way while removing human rights abuses by the current regime. So you see this imbalance, but it's so out there in the open. Or other users include, and this same user, his name is Iskander, who is removing mentions of Hamas terror attacks from like article after article after article. It's not like one case where like, oh, this is not quite well sourced. It's like again and again and again and again. Another editor who has a little info box on his user page that like basically is a expression of support for Hezbollah and making these same types of changes. In some cases, they're trying to like remove connections between Israel and the Jewish people. In some cases, they're just doing subtle things that just look trivial on their own, but taken together, they actually add up to quite a lot. In one case, they were trying to keep an image of the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem as an important Palestinian figure. There was a photo of him touring a concentration camp, and they really didn't want that on his article, and they kept it off.
Like
They
a one
successfully
from the Nazi regime?
yeah. Yeah, he was,
Yeah.
he was, let's say, I don't know if he was allied to them, but there was certainly sympathy between the Grand Mufti and the Nazis, and like he was being taken on this tour, and there's a photo of it, and there's an article about it in Tablet magazine,
Okay, yeah.
and they,
Right.
there was an editor who said like this should be there because it's an important part of history. This is not incidental. It's not like he was touring like some arboretum, right? Like he's touring a concentration camp, and they didn't want it there, and their passion, their dedication to the task of keeping it off the page is itself expressive of something that's going on there. There's a dynamic there that's like most normal people, I would think, would be like, okay, if like it happened, there's a paper trail, and I'm not going to spend hours of my life opposing this thing. I don't really care that much, but they do care a lot, and not in one or two instances, but patterned over dozens of hours per month, sometimes more, over the course of years.
And their true identities are always hidden. Is that's the norm? That's how it is for everyone? Is that a deliberate choice as a good practice?
But yeah, most Wikipedia editors are anonymous. Until recently, you could actually you could edit without registering on the site by just using your IP address, and now they've actually masked the IP addresses, so you don't have that anymore. So vast majority of cases, they are anonymous, and so are those more powerful users on the site, like the admins and like this group of users called check users, which have a real deep ability to like look at your IP address, see what pages you're looking at on Wikipedia, be able to sort of follow you around the site. And we don't know who they are either. And we'd also, for the most part, don't know who the ARBCOM members are. We don't know their names.
That's really interesting because, like, I can see, like, again, in a foundational internet, you can see why that would be a advisable move for a lot of reasons. Like you kind of don't want people to develop personalities around this because it's supposed to be neutral and, basic. And you don't want then people to be, you don't want their lot, like their who they are as people to become enmeshed in what's supposed to be sort of pure information space. But on the other hand, they literally could be like the PR officer for Hamas. Like you literally have no idea, right? I mean, it's a little bit, the knife cuts both ways.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it from the point of view for a moment of a Chinese state propagandist, someone who works in like however they operate out of the foreign ministry or from their like China Daily or something like that. But their job is to influence opinion and belief abroad, and particularly in the United States. And you've got a platform that feeds all these other information sources downstream and that people turn to as quote unquote ground truth. And it says a lot of stuff about China there, about Taiwan, about COVID, about tariffs, about Xi Jinping. Would you be doing your job in any sense if you were not actively involved in manipulating those sources? I just can't imagine that would ever be the case. Like you just come back to your boss in the propaganda department and he said, "What are you doing about Wikipedia?" And you're like, "Well, nothing. Like I'm not supposed to," and blah, blah. Freaking way. Sorry, I didn't want to swear.
Off to the camp with you, son.
Exactly. Like get your work clothes on. You're out.
Let's take that kidney out and sell it on the market. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing, but this is a really important point, I think, because there's a difference there's a sense to which there's a part of this that has always been the case, right? It has always been so that you find opposing power centers fighting for narrative dominance, right? I mean, has there ever been a time that has not happened? You need people to believe in you, and even if you are a despot, actually, you need some level of popular stamp of approval in order to continue with whatever your project is. I mean, as a generalization. So it's always been like that. And then now that we're in supposedly liberal democracies, 10 times more, 100 times more, 1,000,000 times more, that is the case. We need all power centers need some kind of imprint. What do you call it? A seal of approval. I'm trying to think of the phrase. It's not coming to me. So that's all fine. That's realpolitik. That is, it is in your own interest, whoever you are, to fight your own corner and to put your own spin on events that is in your interest. But what really gets to me is that with all of in these liberal democracies that in which we were born and raised, the class of people who are sort of like the keepers of the flame, right? Who are supposed to be the ones who are savvy enough and sophisticated enough to manage this responsibility of information have instead become a combination of like dim-witted rubes who are completely unable to see that maybe they're being used for a nefarious purpose by a greater power, or malevolent ideologues. Even worse still, they themselves will not see it. And I think that's genuine. I don't think that's just self-preservation, although maybe it's self-preservation deep down inside, like they can't admit it to themselves. But they will not accept, even as like more and more people from the outside of their little bubble keep saying, no, you're getting this wrong, media, information czars, fact checkers, this entire ecosystem. You're getting it all wrong. You keep failing major tests. COVID was a huge one. BLM was a huge one. And yet the more we are pointing out to them that they're getting it wrong, the more desperate they are to cling on to this power, and the more entrenched they become in the power. It's this very disconcerting thing. And like this is the same as Wikipedia as with the New York Times. Like there's because with huge organizations, there's always a savvy element to it. But it's like what happened to the savvy people? Like they seem to be gone, and they seem to have been replaced by ideologues.
Yeah, I think you used to have people who were in this class that were willing to diverge more than they are today. Like if you think about Hitchens, or even someone like Tina Brown, who was kind of like, she still is, like she was willing to take a different tack on things that was like, you may not agree with it, but it was at least different from the rest of the pack. And they were so good at that. But I agree. I think for the most part, things have shifted in that direction. And I don't think they see these things as failures. I don't think they look at COVID or BLM as a failure. I think they see it as a major success. They see it as imperfect, like any campaign or any battle or war is. And I think there's no selection pressure on them to think differently. Everything comes from, all the benefits accrue to maintaining that system. And there are moments where I have glimmers of nostalgia for it, maybe, or belief that maybe it's like there's still real value to it when you see some of the stuff online and you see some of like the gross historical revisionism that we're seeing right now about Nazi Germany and Britain and World War II and stuff like that. And you think, all right, maybe the mainstream media have a point. But then you turn around and look at the paper the next day, or you look at like BBC's crazy reporting on something like their Trump thing, where they like cut a video of Trump to make him seem like he was saying the exact opposite of what he was actually saying about the most important possible topic. And nobody said anything for years until they were, and even when they had the report that this had happened, they still didn't actually say anything. It had to be leaked. So at that point, this is where something fundamental has gone wrong, because their entire premise, their entire legitimacy, according to them, is based on the idea that we are transparent, responsible, and that we corroborate and that we confirm and check everything. We have all these layers of editors, and that's why we're worthy of mass public attention. And they do something like that, and you see there's a deliberate effort to not do any of those things, not take any of those steps or check or go through that checklist. Because it didn't suit their agenda.
That is that BBC episode is, I mean, it's shocking but not surprising, like all of this is, because to do that requires that's like an act of commission. That's not an act of omission. That's up there with plagiarism or fabrication. Like, remember, who was it? Was it like Jason Blair who made up quotes from somebody, or Stephen Glass who made up quotes? These old media stories, scandals where people got fired for just making up quotes entirely. This was on par with that, because that's right. They clipped a sentence from the beginning of his speech. This is on January 6th, before the riots broke out, as the day the vote was happening to certify the election. And Trump was he were in a different part of the city, and his followers were there, and he said something like, "We're going to go down to the Capitol," and then they clipped that and they attached to it something from the end of the speech where he's talking about carrying on the battle to look into the 2020 election, and they put it next to the top quote, which was, "We're going to go down to the Capitol." And we're going to fight like hell. Because what he said was, we're going to go down to the Capitol and support our brave congressmen and women. And then the fight like hell comment came 35, 40 minutes later when he was talking about, we're not going to give up. We're going to fight in the courts. We're going to do all this. We're not going to take this election debacle lying down. And the quote that came out was, we're going to go down to the Capitol and we're going to fight like hell. That is the biggest sin you can commit in journalism. I mean, that really just is. I don't think there's a bigger one. And yeah, you're right. It took the memo had to be leaked. So the point is, like, these people are. It's obvious from the outside looking in that they don't consider them. They consider their primary job now to be savior and not journalists. And obviously, I mean, it's obvious to me and you. The problem with that is they don't know democracy if it hit them upside the head. Well, they are confusing democracy with their own inflated self-opinion. They're conflating democracy with, well, I was taught that I was a special little genius and I went to all the best schools, so I would know what democracy is actually, with actual democracy, with the popular will, never mind anything else. So it's like, this is a direct threat to popular sovereignty now. Like, the media stands in direct opposition to the will of the people, and that is just as true in the UK as it is in the United States.
Yeah, I think that this BBC thing is one of these turning point moments, because it can't be ignored. Like, the BBC does tons of this kind of thing. It's just more in these like more topical areas or zones of reporting. And this was institutional and is way worse than anything Jason Blair did, as ridiculous as Blair was with his plagiarism and fabrication.
Way worse. It was insignificant.
Yeah, compared to this is, and what's really interesting about this instance is that you don't have some like grand Washington Post investigation into what happened at the BBC, or New York Times investigation what happened at the BBC. You don't have that kind of like TikTok reporting where you're getting like, and then like so and so went to their boss, the editor of whatever, and said, we need to take care of this, and the boss said, no, we're shutting it down. Like, these are the kinds of stories the New York Times lives for when it comes to a different kind of institution, non-media, let's say left or center media institution. If it's corporate or if it's government, they will drill down and they will put 10 people on that story, and they will get every little bit of information. And great, good, that's the job. And they do it really well sometimes. But then it comes to this massive story, and they don't touch it. They maybe do the reporting, like the news reporting, that this happened because they have to, but they don't do that deeper thing about one of the most spectacular journalistic failures in the last 50 years.
It's a crime. It's not a failure. It wasn't a oopsie. It was definitely deliberate. I mean, how could it not be? No, I mean, but look, the New York Times can't, because the New York Times was day one on the ground with the narrative shaping of the insurrection.
Yes.
And that came out very clearly when Matt Rosenberg was caught in a sting operation by James O'Keefe and trying to impress his date, I'm assuming. I don't know who was on the other side of the table that he was talking to, but he was talking to some person, and he's like, oh yeah, no, I mean, this whole thing was like totally overblown. There were so many feds in the crowd, and complaining about how all the younger reporters were acting like pussies, and like, and it was just, I mean, like, then you go and read his article, and he was one of the, I think it was probably the 7th. It must have been the 7th of January, the day one story. And it's like, the projectiles were flying overhead and the roar of the crowd. And like, I'm like, you are responsible for a grave attack on democracy. You are admitting, and sure enough, he was caught admitting. He wasn't openly admitting it, but he said, my coverage was not actually accurate. We all kind of over-egged the pudding here. And then you go and read it, and it was like, if you only read the story, you're like, oh my God, there was like a crowd of axe-wielding Trump supporters who were there to like chop AOC to pieces, and like the New York Times can no more look into that can of worms than they can, become Pope. Like they are as complicit, actively as complicit as anything the BBC has done. No one's leaked their dirty laundry yet, and they probably won't. To be honest, I don't see that happening, because the New York Times does have incredible internal loyalty. And I know that from having worked there for 3 years. And I can also say this, actually, I worked there in the 90s when woke was not a thing. No one had ever heard of it. We just thought it was some crazy thing. People political correctness was just like on like the Oberlin campus or whatever. But even now, I see retirees, people who were senior people when I was a kid, I worked there when I was very young. And they are entirely afflicted with Trump derangement syndrome. They think, how dare the New York Times say that Biden was cognitively impaired? Like, how dare anyone criticize Hillary? Like, they are as entrenched in let's say woke ideology as the young people, which is very disturbing to me. That they didn't have the wisdom and the detachment to see the wood from the trees and see the manipulations, the so many different types of manipulation were at play. But this is what I think it comes down to, is that to be a New York Times person, if you're an employee, so much the better, but even just a reader, is to be given like an imprimatur of goodness and sophistication and intelligence and worldliness, and just by being in the realm of the New York Times, whether it's a reader or someone who works there, your status is automatically elevated. My theory basically about all of this is that it's entirely status based. It has almost nothing to do with politics. I mean, I think that people tell themselves they believe in the wacky politics side of this, but actually it's more of a status signal, and people will not give up their status. They would rather die than give up their status.
Yeah, well, it's a good world to have status in when you're on the East Coast of the United States, the Northeast specifically. And it is a sophisticated world, and it's a nice world, and there are nice things in it,
Nice.
and clever people and power. You're always power adjacent. You're always money adjacent. And especially as a journalist, today, I think it's become a bit winner takes all. So if you're a New York Times whatever reporter, I think you're doing pretty great as a journalist compared to some of the other opportunities or non-opportunities that are out there today. So there is a lot that would be militating towards investing your identity in that institution or any number of other institutions. And I think with Wikipedia, it's analogous. It's not power and money.
Yeah.
It's not what they care about. It is the ability to shape thought, to shape our understanding of knowledge. It's almost more of a monkish kind of thing, kind of a monkish status seeking in their in this little world. But with the media today, I don't think we're going to have a wake up moment. I think maybe with Barry Weiss taking the helm at CBS, that's a major disruption. It'll be a change of some sort. We don't know what yet. But, we've had a generation of new media outlets kind of rise up in the last 5 years, or maybe a little bit more. And that has shaped the landscape as well. So it's not only the mainstream media today. There are a lot of other players that have a significant impact, which is a good thing.
Totally. Yeah, no, it's changing rapidly. But before we started this conversation today, I watched your interview with Andy No from your recent interview on your own YouTube channel, which is NPOV. Am I correct?
Yep.
So people can follow up on that. It's very interesting, and I know Andy, and I have a huge admiration for him. But he said something very interesting, which was that the Wikipedia well, the way the media in general portrayed him, even though they were far left, kind of like free newspapers, these were not like necessarily status publications, but because they ended up in Wikipedia, then liberals and progressives who would never, take a bike lock to anyone's head, like ever, shunned him essentially because they were using as their primary source the Wikipedia articles, and he was then tainted like as if he had like the cooties and they couldn't go near him, even though he presents as this, he's soft spoken, he's not white, he fits all of these sort of like oppression boxes,
Yeah, he's like from
and
Portland
yet
or Spring.
he's from Portland. His parents were refugees. He's a gay man. He's Asian, and he's clearly you only have to listen
And a
to him talk for
journalist.
like 30. And
This
a
is part of
journalist.
what Wikipedia has really, really worked very hard to deny. Again,
Yes.
it's not just like, it's not all the consensus of Wikipedia. All of the massive crowdsourced mechanism Wikipedia has now decided that Andy No is not. No, it's two guys. It's two guys who are obsessive about this topic and will fight it out for literally years. And I found the two guys and I chronicle it all in that article. And you just see how they won over the course of years to get this notion cemented that he's A, not a journalist, and B, he's a quote unquote right wing influencer, provocateur. And then like they rely on academic sources like this woman Joan Donovan, who's this like professor of disinformation is what she calls herself, but she's the Harvard source, but she was never Harvard faculty. And when she was kind of let go from Harvard, she made all these unsubstantiated allegations against the school that they were essentially bribed by Mark Zuckerberg to get rid of her. None of this gets layered into that claim. We just see Harvard faculty, again, false on its face. Joan Donovan said this and this and this about Andy No. Therefore, now you all believe that it's true. And none of it was true. And the thing is exactly what you said, that people would then Google Andy, and then they don't just see it in the Wikipedia article, they see it in the Google knowledge panel about him. Hard right, associated with, who is he associated with on Google? Proud Boys this and whatever else, like far right advocacy activists, whatever they are, groups. And that's not who Andy is. Like, Andy personally. I know Andy personally. I know him professionally as a journalist. The guy has done the greatest journalism on Antifa out there, bar none. And solo with all this risk to him personally. It's not just risk. He's actually been attacked twice, brain injury. Any other journalist who had endured what this guy has gone through to tell his story would be adulated, would be held up by the media as like the paragon of everything it means to
like
be
a
a journalist.
Nieman fellow or whatever.
Given prizes, given like a Guggenheim or whatever, a MacArthur Genius, like whatever it is. But no, Andy No instead is now a far right influencer, agitator, provocateur, blah 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 blah. Wikipedia has called him.
Well, I'll tell you a story of this in the wild. So the New York Times, he went to the White House a few months ago with a few other independent reporters, and they did an event, like a press event where these guys Andy and his fellow reporters were telling their experiences covering Antifa, and Trump was there listening. And it was I thought Andy's story is so compelling, and I thought he did a good job telling it. And the New York Times story about that was right-wing influencers are invited to the White House. Again, this influencer thing. I mean, the choice of language is so specific and it's so deliberate. For a fact that had this been like, the Hamas, like a freelance BBC journalist who turned out to be, actually Hamas, they would have been like, he's a journalist. Okay. He's a freelance journalist.
Yeah.
And is an influencer and a far right or right wing influencer. And around that same time, and it was after Charlie Kirk died, and then they died after Charlie Kirk was murdered in front of us all.
Yes. That was the media framing that slipped out right there.
That's right. Sorry. Yeah, my bad.
After he was murdered / assassinated.
After he was assassinated for his political and social beliefs. Someone I know on Instagram started posting about how Antifa was fake, not a real thing, which is the line that, of course, because I've been following the story for years. Oh no, it's not really it's an organization. It's just an
Yeah.
idea, whatever nonsense.
Decentralized.
And so she was finding that talking point and she was putting it up on her Instagram. And post Charlie Kirk, I was like, I've had a long-standing no engagement policy, which I've broken a few times here and there, but I can't spend my life fighting with libtards on the internet, so I don't. But I was like, you know what, I can't tolerate this, and I messaged her. Of course, this woman is extremely well-to-do and very woke, and I'm not gonna say more about it, but like, just trust me, very well-to-do. Okay, extremely, all of the things that you associate with like a wealthy suburban housewife, all of it. And I said, listen, Anito's a friend of mine. You're wrong about Antifa. You're just straight up wrong. He was beaten so badly he had to be hospitalized. He had a brain bleed. These people are dangerous. I'm not here to argue with you. I'm just telling you your facts are wrong. And I think it threw in a little thing. Like, I was in the newspaper business for years. Trust me. Okay, you're wrong. And she came back with, well, I Googled him. And actually, Proud Boys. I'm like, all of the things that Andy was talking about in that exact interview that you did with him a month ago. All of the things, she said, all of the things. It's literally like clockwork. These people, the information war is so well executed that its targets always perform like little wind up monkeys. It works so well. And she said, actually, I don't really have any sympathy for him. And this is, again, a very well-to-do woman who is in absolutely no physical danger of anything whatsoever. And that liberal cruelty, that liberal callousness, I find so disgusting. And it's like, liberal isn't really the right word for it, although it's the only word for it because that's what those people think of themselves as. It's just curdled into this, well, actually, you deserve to die. Sorry.
Yeah. It's like this. I think, again, a lot of it is about the way these things are mediated, not just online, but also through the media itself, where the media is giving a framing of a very Manichaean, like it's very good versus evil, black and white. If you're not a good guy, you're a bad guy. It's like
Right.
it's what the media accused George W. Bush of doing with the, if you're not for us, you're against us. And this kind of thing was always pilloried by the media and academia as being just, there's no shades of gray. But for them, there are no shades of gray online. And I actually get the sense that whoever this is, the person you engaged with, if she had a 30-minute conversation with Andy in a cafe somewhere and listened to his story or just talked, she would come away thinking he's an amazing person and he's got a great story and what he went through was horrible, because it was, and that he's doing very important work, even if she disagrees with it. I actually think that there's a significant chance that a lot of people in this space would come away with that. But because this is it's all on a battlefield of information. Everything is whatever gets imported into this space becomes militarized, and
Yes.
you have to choose sides. That's the George Bush thing. You have to choose sides on a battlefield.
Right. Exactly. That's actually really, because obviously it's an information war. It's a hot information war.
Yeah.
The Civil War is still cold. It's not kinetic yet, except it kind of is in little skirmishes. But
Yes.
the information war is very hot, and the entire world theater is the theater. But the reason you have to pick sides, and this is something I talk about all the time, actually, that information war. But the reason you have to pick sides is you have to stay allied to the safety of the status tribe that you want to align yourself with. And this is something that I've been writing and thinking about a lot, because I got very frustrated over the woke right debates, so that I wasn't buying it at all. And I felt that they were they were very libtarded in their own way, and they were actually more woke than the people they were accusing of woke right, which was kind of awkward, because like the reason this thing came up was largely over Israel, and I'm not a supporter of Israel, but like I'm certainly much more of a supporter of Israel than not. And that just seems like a very obvious. So it doesn't seem controversial to me at all. But so like these people, the people who are going against woke right, the formulation of woke right by James Lindsay and all them, and Konstantin Kisin tended to be anti-Israel. Anyway, that doesn't really matter. The woke right thing on its own, I just seemed like very untrue and bad faith to me. And Konstantin Kisin, after Charlie Kirk, was complaining that people were getting fired for expressing, happiness that he was dead or something. And I was like, well, first of all, they're not qualitatively the same. Like, you're not being woke by saying you shouldn't support someone getting shot in the throat in front of millions, billions of people at your job. Like, I mean, you shouldn't do that at your job. Sorry. It's not the same thing as saying, oh, actually, I don't think men can get pregnant. Number one. But number two is, like, what they do, because they're still fundamentally liberals, they still appeal to this sort of like universal principle aspect, which I don't think is helpful. It might be interesting to talk about at a dinner party, but it's not helpful in action, in terms of actioning, using your agency in the information war. Because what is driving people, I'm telling you right now, with the exception of a handful of nerds on the internet, it's not universal liberal principles. It's, how can I mimic the person I most want to be next to so that I can be next to them and get attention in that slipstream of attention? Like, I'm in the attention economy. I want to be proximate to some person that I think is cool or famous or something, and align myself with them. So how am I going to do that? I'm going to adopt the same poses as them, and the same language as them, and the same phrases as them, and the same little TikTok dances, and the same little hand gestures, and the same little things. And I'm going to do all of that because it's our monkey brain. It's not our intellectual brain that has allowed woke to spread so far. And I think that's why the information war is so effective, because it's not appealing to us on an intellectual basis. It's appealing to us on a much more primal one.
Yeah. I do think, though, a lot of the woke stuff was spread top down, and it was architected and engineered for certain whatever reasons. Maybe they're good faith, maybe they're not. But and then it was spread in a very canny way through corporations and like sort of enlisting big corporations into this thing, because you could reach a lot more people that way. You can reach a lot more people through brand advertising than you can through even mainstream media. Like an advertisement could reach easily tens of millions, and in some cases, if it doesn't reach tens of millions, it's a failure. So I think there was an intellectual element to it. It was a deliberate thing, but yeah, it appeals to something tribal in us, like as tribal as the left and center left had accused the right of being for many years, with, like, going back to the NASCAR dad thing. But I think on the right, this backlash is partly a backlash that among young white men who have been demonized. They have been demonized.
Yeah.
And I don't sympathize with any of their positions at all on any of these, anything that is even in the blast radius of the Groyper movement.
Right.
But you have to understand the dynamics of it. And the dynamics is if you're being told for 10 years that you as a man, and you as a white man or as a white person, and you as a Western person, and all three categories separately and all intersected are evil, essentially, or sometimes literally, there is going to be a repercussion for that of some kind. Human beings are human beings. They will protect themselves from what they believe is an attack. This is an attack. So there is something there that has to be acknowledged and dealt with. And then there is the thing that is also layered on top of this, which is an ongoing propaganda war. And it's not a war of ideas. It's a war of power, and power played out by states and state-like entities like global terror groups, and having access to open systems like Wikipedia or X or any other social media platform, where you don't need to ask permission to post whatever you want and convince millions of people of whatever you want, is, again, it's going back to our Chinese propagandist example. It's just too good an opportunity to pass up if this is your field. You would not just let it go. So that's a part of what we're seeing on the so-called woke right. And then I think there is something as well ideological, and something isolationist as well, that is about America's foreign wars, and Israel has been included in that categorization for a lot of different reasons. Some of them are political domestically in the United States. Some of them are actually denominational, dealing with opposing religious forces in the United States and within Christianity, not among Jews. And some of them are ideological. Some of them are flat out rooted in anti-Semitism itself. It's not one thing. It's not simple. But I think it's what we're seeing on that part of the right is pernicious. It's not healthy. It's not good. I don't think it's appealing to our better angels as anybody in the country, right, left, or anything else, but it's there.
It's there. Yeah, I also don't. I think that it's something of a sideshow. I've become. I'm not a cynical person. In fact, I'm actually kind of a Pollyanna. But I think I have become cynical in one regard, or very vigilant in one regard, which is I see feds everywhere. I like because the media and the Biden administration and all the Brexit, all of these big stories that happened were so obviously sort of puppeteered. Like you could see the workings. Like you weren't supposed to see it, but you were able to see it. It was like that the Wizard of Oz when they pull back the curtain on the wizard and it's that little sad man. That's what all of the media reaction to Brexit and Trump and COVID and looked like. So I'm just like
The Biden debate.
yeah, the Biden debate, like everything was so obviously fake. Everything is fake and gay. Like just everything is fake and gay now. And so I tend to wonder about someone like Nick Fuentes. I'm like, totally would. I personally feel like I would not be surprised at all if he was absolutely a Fed. If someone is doing exactly what the kind of regime, the Globo Homo regime wants and is getting very, very popular, I will always put a question mark under that, being like, okay, well, how astroturfed is this? Having said that, the anti-Semitism online, there's no way that could be fully astroturfed because it's so prevalent. It is everywhere. It is left and right. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. It's fiendishly common.
Yeah. But
And
I actually
yeah.
do think it is, a lot of that is in a weird way astroturfed. It's not, I don't think it's, I guess what in the realm of conspiracy theory they would call like a false flag, or I don't know. It's an op in the sense that it's there to divide. It's there, it's in it, not all of it, some of it is absolutely authentic, genuine article, but a lot of it, I believe, is put there by, to sow discord. It's agitprop, right? Soviets gave it a perfect name.
Very
It's
good. Yeah, that's
agitprop.
exactly
It's
right.
designed to achieve geopolitical aims. Part of those aims are to cleave America off from an ally. This is chess, right? If you're trying to go
Right.
after the king, you want to first take out a bishop. It makes sense. But also more so, I think in a more dynamic sense, it's there to stir as much instability as you can.
Yeah.
When you look at some of these,
Demoralization.
yeah, demoralization, and also discrediting your own government and your own system of governance, where when we think about like the 9/11 attacks, my sense, my belief is that the physical attacks were just the opening shot. The real attack was the moral attack that came for the next 20 years, which alternately went through cycles of A, America deserved it, had it coming. B, America actually did this, the government did it, and C, like it not only deserved it and did it, but then it also covered it up and by hurting other people and creating a lot of other distractions. So the entire sequence is one of delegitimizing the United States of America. That's the attack. And this is the kind of thing I think we're seeing today online, where you're saying is owned by Israel. It's like that's not as much of an attack on Israel as it is on America today as a legitimate governing force. Because what you're saying is that the government is not real. And this is the essence of what the notion or the lore about a psyop, like what we saw with aftermath of Charlie Kirk's assassination, which is that you see the crazier conspiracy theories saying not only was his death fake, his life was fake, his wife was fake, his kids were fake. This is what came out of this. And it's the same notion on a geopolitical level with America, where you say nothing that you're seeing is real. It's a complete facade. It's a psyop. You should not believe in your government, and you should not believe in the way that your country exists currently.
And you should not believe in what you see yourself. You shouldn't trust yourself. And
Exactly.
that is a demonic demoralization technique.
It's the Stasi.
So
it's the Stasi mentality at work.
Yes. So I have this bookmarked. It's from 2014 from The Intercept by Glenn Greenwald, before he was kicked out of The Intercept for not being woke enough. And you can Google it. The headline is How Covert Agents Infiltrate the Internet to Manipulate, Deceive, and Destroy Reputations. I mean, like, this is such an Of course they do. Of course they do. Nobody should be surprised that this happens because it is an information war and it is a battlefield. Just to your point earlier about if you're a Chinese agent and you're not influencing your country's Wikipedia page, then you're not doing your job properly. I mean, because people are on the internet, people are online, people's realities are, for better, well, for worse, shaped by what they read online. So of course, if you are capturing that, if you are capturing a certain demographic and pumping them full of this idea of like, you can't trust anyone, or even more so, there's no point. There's no point. Everything is every person or movement I feel a sort of solidarity with is actually X, Y, and Z. It's a Zion infiltrated by Zionists or Jews or whatever it is. You are neutralizing your opposition, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. And you make an entire society look like it's these people, like it's Pirates of the Caribbean. It's just all fake animatronics and no one believes anything anymore. I think online, among a certain segment of people, that's the prevailing view. The problem is that there is so much that the government has done, particularly in the last 6-7 years, that really actually lines up with the story. So like there's enough supporting evidence, and the harder the center-left establishment that we discussed earlier tries to retain and maintain control of information, and the greater extremes it goes to do this, the more fodder, the more evidence it provides to the other side that this is really going on. So it's like with Russiagate as a great example, where you have this notion that Trump conspired with the Kremlin and was like using like Morse code and pinging a server at some bank in Russia to like communicate blah, blah, blah. None of it was substantiated. You have Columbia Journalism Review coming out with this big investigative piece by Jeff Gerth, a former New York Times investigative reporter, won a Pulitzer, saying most of this just was never substantiated. Some of it was proven to be not true. Yet you have this 7-year-long narrative funded by Hillary Clinton, operated by Hillary Clinton with her knowledge, that was just fake. It was just fake. And now, oh my God, now we have these people out there watching this stuff, or watching the COVID stuff, and watching like the vaccines prevent transmission. They knew, for the most part, that was not true. They knew generally that the virus could have come from a lab. They called it a conspiracy theory before there was evidence in either direction. So you weaponize that term, conspiracy theory. And now when we're seeing actual real life crazy conspiracy theories come to the fore online and elsewhere, you use that term and you sound like you're part of the conspiracy because of this context.
Yeah, that's right. Right, exactly. And that's my point about the Fed thing. When like the Candace Owens, the Nick Fuentes, they are own goals at best, in the sense that, not that I would consider myself on the same team as either of them, but to the extent that I'm on the right and they are on the right, because the right has scored so many victories against the narrative with with capital N, and they turned out eventually each one of those things was disproven. The COVID thing, the origin of COVID, the vaccine, the Fedsurrection, the Russiagate, just like boom, 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 one thing after another. It's very, very handy and helpful for the big narrative establishment to have Candace Owens and Nick Fuentes to point to. It's very, very handy. And I think that is, that's what makes me wonder. Not that it doesn't surprise me that there's an appetite for this stuff. There's National Enquirer. Remember Bat Boy? Like there's always an audience for this.
It's just just the people who have taken that machinery, the Bat Boy machinery. And this is something I'm writing about right now in a story. Bat Boy, if people out there don't remember, like in the supermarket, you would have these, like, I guess you would call it tabloid newspapers, and they were just fake. National Enquirer, just like fake stories. And Bat Boy, you'd always see Bat Boy, right? And Bat Boy was just something that indulges our, like, this need for this crazy, uncanny, shocking, intellectually it's true, but there's something inside your body being like, oh my God, what if that is true? And it's fun.
Yeah.
You might pick it up and read it. I never did,
It's
but
fun.
You might, and just throw it away and be done. Move on with your life. But what the political and geopolitical versions of this thing did was hijack that epistemic machinery where people are able to suspend their disbelief because they want to, because they know it's not true, and because it doesn't matter to their lives. They're hijacking that to import ideas just as crazy, but they have political content in them, highly political content. So it gets crazier and crazier and crazier, and you're just sort of that same riled up sense of, oh my God, could this possibly be true? But what they're actually saying is that Israel and France and parts of the United States government teamed up to kill Charlie Kirk and whatever else, blah, 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 blah. And now it's at the point where you're like, that's actually kind of like, maybe that's crazy, but it's also a bit dangerous.
Maybe, yeah. So here's a good question to end on. It's a terrible question to end on because it's such a big question. Has Israel lost the information war?
It's certainly losing it. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But I think the thing we have to remember about Israel is that it's very busy. It has been very busy, not just fighting a war, but also running a society. So when we think about its enemy, primary enemy, Hamas has one responsibility right now and for the last 25 years, which is make war against Israel. It doesn't have to run its schools. It doesn't have to run hospitals. It doesn't have to raise money and levy taxes. I mean, it does do some of these things on the side, but for the most part, the international community has stepped in and done all these things for it, leaving Hamas completely free to wage war. That includes information war. Israel has to fight the war on 6, 7 fronts or whatever it is. It has to run schools. It has to run a welfare system. It has to run a court system. It's doing scientific inquiry. It's doing economic stuff. It's doing roads and infrastructure. It's building the Iron Dome and the laser beam, all this stuff at the same time. And it's got to do this other thing, which is fight an information war. And it is very bad at it. It is very bad at telling its own story. It comes from, I think, a lot of places. Partly it's defensive. Partly it's a very complicated story to tell in the face of an entire world that's telling almost the exact opposite story. So it is definitely.
But wait, Ashley, I thought the Jews control the media.
If they do, they are not the most Zionistic Jews I've ever seen. You know,
They're
they don't
literally
seem to be
incompetent.
doing a great job. So that's the whole thing with
They're
the New York
worst
Times.
puppet masters ever. Yeah.
Again, and this is the thing about the conspiracy theory realm, which is that that is positioned as like part of the op. That like they don't appear to be good, but they actually are good behind the scenes. So yeah, Israel's is not winning the propaganda war, of course. It's fighting just as many enemies on that battlefield as it's fighting on the kinetic one. So that's not an easy position to be in. Hopefully it'll figure out a better way of telling its story and maintaining good faith in the information, in the battle for information, battle for people's minds. You don't want to go down the road of your enemies, which is wholesale lying and at all costs, like defeat at all costs in the information realm, because you corrupt the very nature of information. You always want to stick to the notion of truth. And that's a one advantage Israel does have. And I'm not saying Israel's story is more true than the Palestinians or anybody else's. What I am saying is that it's got a modernist mindset in the sense that whether or not Hamas, like if it tells like the worst possible lies and all it ever does is lie in order to gain, it doesn't actually affect anything in the society, because a society that is, or let's say a governing class, a political echelon that's always lying, as long as it keeps itself propped up and in power, that works. But if you're a society that is rooted in like medical diagnoses or scientific inquiry and scientific advancement and being able to figure out like the right trajectory for an Iron Dome interceptor to like intercept the missile coming in, those things are based in an idea of a fundamental, like the modernist enlightenment idea that there is such a thing as objective truth in there. And a society as a whole embraces that idea, and they can't separate from it too much. Like they can't go too far afield because it's incorporated into their very notion of how their society exists. And because of that, I hope Israel is able to find a way to tell a story that is rooted in actual objective truth. And part of that truth is always about acknowledging that there is another perspective from theirs, which is something that is very hard to do, especially when you're in the middle of what you called a hot information war.
Yeah. I mean, do think, I am not black-pilled, because I do think very genuinely and sincerely that the truth does win in the end. The cost and the loss that you might incur getting there, that's a different topic, but the truth is irrepressible, I think. And I think there is such thing as the truth. I think there is such thing as right and wrong. And I think that's actually kind of the only principle I have at this point, is just that, try to be good at recognizing the difference. But I mean, look how many times these narratives have been toppled, even with all of the, quote unquote, most sophisticated, most educated, most connected institutions and individuals on the face of the earth. And they still didn't successfully pull the wool over our eyes and a multitude of stories. So, it always feels like the battle's on the verge of being lost, but somehow we managed to pull it out at the end. At least, like, I can go to sleep at night pretty sure that, I'm seeing something of the fullest picture, as much as any one individual can. Obviously, there's blind spots everywhere, but I am pretty confident. I'm confident because I ask myself this all the time. I check in with myself all the time. Like, are we on the right side of history here? And it keeps coming back. Well, yes, you are for now.
Yeah, I think when you can see when you have a sense that you can see the bigger picture, the full picture, I think that's one of those things that comes as a result of living in a democracy or in a democratic system, rather than anything totalitarian where you can see literally nothing except what you're shown at any given moment and it's total. So again, I feel like that's part of as we're seeing a lot of change, upheaval, a lot of negative forces, but we are still feeling that there's a democratic, something underpinning the democratic structure of our society that is holding strong for now, which is a great thing because it's really been tested.
Yeah. Yeah, and we'll have to do another one of these in a few months' time, because we're both in the United Kingdom. We're both Americans living in the United Kingdom. We didn't even discuss that. All right,
time.
Ashley. Well, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you for
Jenny.
giving me so much of your time. And I will send me links to various things so I can put it in the show notes. But in the meantime, do you want to tell people where they can find your work?
Just my ex, which is Ashley Rindsberg, and our site at NPOV, which is neutralpov.com. That's the Substack focused on Wikipedia investigations, and we will be doing a lot more.
All right, Ashley, it was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Jenny.